We set off in our 6-metre boat for a lovely day of fishing off the coast of Low Head, Tasmania. At 7:30 a.m, Bass Strait was like a mill pond, and my two brothers and I were enjoying some great fishing. We were 10 kilometres out to sea and were reeling in Tasmania's finest fish: mowong, nanagai, mackerel, barracuda, pike and flathead. At 1 p.m, the wind began to pick up a little and the predicted rain began to fall. We had not expected the rain would develop into a low-pressure system. Within 30 minutes, the Bass Strait mill pond transformed into a squall with a 2-metre-plus swell. As the rain came down, land was no longer visible, and the vision of a freak wave breaking over our boat took everyone's breath away. I confess that at that moment, I was not thinking that death by drowning would be to my or my family's advantage. I saw it as an enemy. If you are facing the possibility of a life-limiting illness, you are most probably grieving death rather than welcoming it. If you have a loved one whose life is in the balance, uncertain about the outcome, you will not be looking at death as your friend, but as your enemy. So why would the Apostle Paul, inspired by the Spirit of God, write the words, "For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain"? To describe our impending death or the death of a loved one as a gain feels repulsive. It's like trying to unite similar pole magnets. If Paul is referring to death as a state of non-existence, then this divine statement makes no sense. But he's not. He's referring to life, the life that the indwelling presence of Christ provides for the Christian in both life and death. To be clear, when the Bible speaks about responses to death, it uses words like sorrow, enemy, grieve, wept, and the like. For example, in the very next chapter of Paul's letter to the Philippians, when the apostle is faced with a possibility of his friend and co-worker Epaphroditus dying, he says, "Indeed, he was ill and almost died, but God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but also on me, to spare me sorrow upon sorrow." Philippians chapter 2, verse 27. For Paul, the death of Epaphroditus would mean sorrow upon sorrow, because with death comes loss. In his first letter to the Thessalonians, Paul acknowledges the grief that accompanies death. In John 11, when the Lord Jesus sees the outpouring of emotion at the tomb of his friend Lazarus, he weeps. This means that God himself feels and expresses the awful pain that comes through death. And most importantly of all, 1 Corinthians 15 declares that death is an enemy to be overcome, not a friend to be embraced. The statement, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain," is not making light of death's awful reality. It's not teaching us to embrace death, nor is it an encouragement to escape life. It's a statement about the radical difference that the presence of Christ makes to the life and death of a believer. When Paul wrote his letter to the Philippian Christians, he was in a Roman prison. He was uncertain as to whether he would be released from prison or executed by the Romans. He had no choice in the matter. But his chief concern was to honour Christ, whether in life or in death. When he considered the prospect of being released from prison, Paul thought of the work he could do in service for Christ. This is what Paul meant when he said, "For to me, to live is Christ." But when he considered the possibility of execution at the hands of the Romans, he said, "And to die is gain." Here is the question that demands an answer. What could Paul possibly gain through death? The gain that Paul spoke about was not just for himself. This gain is for every Christian throughout all generations. It is so easily passed over that most people would think little of it. Whether we acknowledge it or not, it is the one thing that meets our unfulfilled need for joy. It's the gain of living in the unshielded presence of the exalted and glorified Lord Jesus Christ. Paul said, "If I'm to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labour for me. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know. I'm torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far." Philippians chapter 1, verse 23.